Hey, I'm Byron. Welcome back. We're continuing playing as the Egyptians in the Mesopotamian campaign. Civilization 3 Conquest. We only have a few more turns till this game is over, and I should win. Just a few more turns. We have the Great Lighthouse, and the Mausoleum should happen in the next turn. So, Great Lighthouse in 3 turns. So on 3 turns, the game will end. One way or another. Today's topic that we're going to be discussing is something I sort of came up with myself. And that is 3 laws of economic inequality. Economic inequality has been in the news a bit lately, more than usual. It's a persistent problem, as I'm going to discuss. But first is a disclaimer, and it's not a disclaimer, a political disclaimer. Oh, that's the Great Lighthouse. This should be the game. There we go. We won. Less than an hour. That's good. Let's play the video. I think victory points is what we're going for. Anyway, the disclaimer is about the structure of this video. If I was writing an essay on this, I have the 3 laws, and I'm going to talk about them a bit, but I also have a general discussion of class and economics. If I was writing an essay, I would first talk about class and economics, and then finish with the 3 laws. But the way this is structured, with me just going until I run out of time, I'm going to do the 3 laws first, and then move on to the more general discussion. And this is always pretty cool. It doesn't really. I don't know why a lot of people like to just watch the map when it's done. And whenever they come out with a Civ game, they seem not to have the map. And they always put that in later. But this is one of the coolest things. And see there, I take my jump. And victory points. Well on my way to winning. Like I said, Egypt's the easiest one to win the Wonder Victory. It's pretty easy to get Phoenicia, especially if Phoenicia's the AI. And everyone else is the AI to protect you. Top 5 cities, that was a cool screen. This game was just cool. I mean, the other games are better, but this was just so cool. The later games, I mean, they get better as they go on. I think even Civ 5 is better than Civ 4, Civ 6 is better than Civ 5. When I was practicing before I started doing this, I accidentally clicked one more turn. When I was practicing, I never won a game except that one, Fall of Rome. And the next one we're going to be doing is Rise of Rome, which might be the hardest. I think it's probably the second hardest one in the game. Especially if you draw Rome. I'm going to random it, but if I draw Rome, it can be pretty difficult, which is ironic because they're the ones who historically, I guess, quote-unquote, won. And if I can't win, I'm going to lower the difficulty. I win it that way. And who do I get? I got Persia. And notice, it's interesting, see over there where Egypt was? The colors are sort of the same, where it goes from yellow to purple. Even though that's not historically what happened. Persia starts out at war with Greece. Greece starts out at war with Persia, and they cannot make peace. The same with Rome and Carthage. And when you play Rome, that's what's so hard about this. Is you have Carthage, you either have to go in and invade Carthage, which takes a lot of time, and a lot of navy, which is hard, for me at least, in this game. And you have to go in, pretty much take out Carthage first, before you can start attacking, because when you beat Carthage, you're still not ahead of Persia in score, or Greece if they've won the war for Persia. So we had to fight, but this was easier because you start out ahead. We have an easier guy to beat in Macedon, and this one does not use victory points. I think it was supposed to. That's my guess, is that it was supposed to use victory points, because if it had, Rome would be the easiest one, because you're always in more battles as Rome, I think, and you get victory points for winning battles and taking over cities and stuff like that. So the first law of economic inequality is there is economic inequality. This is pretty fundamental, and one of the main points with this law is that these three laws are true for all times, in all places, throughout history. There has been no civilization, no group of people, no tribe, no migrants, no city, no nation, no empire, where there was not economic inequality. And not only is this inequality within nations, but also between nations. Even so-called communist countries, there was inequality there. And when I was researching this, I saw a map, and it used to be on the maps China was called economically equal, which was never true. But the most recent map I saw had colors determining economic equality, and China and America were the exact same color. And America was around the middle of the pack, I think, in terms of color. The second law of inequality, of economic inequality, is slightly more controversial than the first. There should be economic inequality. If someone produces more, they should receive more. And that's where it's time to say this is about politics, not economics, really, these three laws. You can't create equations and predict behaviors based on these laws. These are laws of politics, not economics. But and there's also no real evidence for any of these laws. I just have it. It's just sort of based on things I see in the news. Bernie Sanders made a big deal about economic inequality when he was running for president, and it's important. It's on a lot of people's minds, and it's also based on the political philosophies of other people, fairly common political philosophies that people have. I don't think anyone really thinks that full economic equality is possible, and I think most people agree with me that there needs to be some disparity between a banker and a fry cook. Of course, people point to things where there are economic inequalities where there shouldn't be, like how baseball players make more than nurses, which maybe they shouldn't, but this is a system which would have nurses making more than baseball players, probably be less efficient than the system we have now, and both baseball players and nurses might suffer. This is what a lot of people say is sort of what I subscribe to as a political philosophy. And now the third political law of economic inequality is probably the least controversial of the three, but it's a great capstone, is there is more economic inequality than there should be. It sort of goes to what I was just saying about the baseball players and nurses. And it's time to, I mean, when I say that law, I think I should reiterate that these laws are always true. And there's no way, that's why they're laws. It's like the law of gravity. There's no way to get around it. It's impossible. There will always be forces at work keeping the economic inequality higher than what is just or optimal for an economic system. And this is part of a larger political philosophy that I have, where basically all things fall under this category, where you can always strive for better. And to me, that's pretty hopeful, that you can always have a more just system than you have. You'll never have a system which is perfectly just, or too just. That's not really, you can't really be too just, but you could, like I said before with the second law, there can be too much economic inequality, but you'll never really get there. Oh, in the assigned military alliances, this is a big part of the game, I think. In order to sort of stem the tide of the units coming at you, like Macedon is doing right now to me, you have to get someone else to declare war on them. And you usually do that when it's the AI with money. Money, I don't think, is as important in this game as it is. It's not really as important in Civ. The AI always considers it more important than it actually is, money. It's good, and of course in this game you have the science slider. So you can determine, so money determines science, which is important, but in the scenarios here, it's actually not as important as in the base game. Science. And he has his army. Did I start my army yet? I don't think so. I'm not even sure I will. I got a couple cities there that are undefeated. And in this game the AI can see all your cities, so they go for the ones that are least defended. You can sort of trick the AI into going for undefeated cities by moving a spearman back and forth between two cities. That way, once they get close to one undefeated city, as soon as the city becomes defended by a spearman, they will immediately turn around and go to the city that the spearman just left. And that sort of traps the AI going back and forth between cities and lets you do whatever you want to them. It's kind of cheating, but the game is also cheating by looking at your board. So that's not really, I don't do it, but I'm not saying you shouldn't. And that's the thing about the difficulty level. It's not only how good you are at the game and the difficulty, but it's also how you want to play. If you put out too high a difficulty, you're going to be desperate to win, and you're going to be using every single exploit in the game that you can. And to me, using exploits just isn't that fun, so it's better to turn the difficulty down. And weirdly, I want to win every single game, and I consider it too hard if I don't. But realistically, there's 4 players in this game, so the perfect difficulty level for my skill level would be one where I win 1/4 of the time, not half the time or all the time. So I guarantee if I played this game 4 times, I'd win one of them, just by sheer chance. Well, not sheer chance, but just by the law of averages. And that means that this difficulty setting is actually probably a little too low for me. But I don't want to waste my time losing games. That, to me, is just not that fun. So basically, back to class theory. I don't know if we can call it class theory. I didn't know what else to call it. But ways to define. This has to do with classes, of course, and inheritance is a very big part of this. rich people have rich kids. And it's not just because of inheritance, it's because of opportunity and education. Also, rich people can afford to take more time off work and spend more time with their kids, making the kids actually, sort of back to the second law, actually quote-unquote superior to the poor kids because they had a better home environment, just because their parents were there more. So one can't really say, I mean, if you're just going based on skill level, then you're still going to have the generational disparity. And a lot of people consider themselves middle class, and people talk about the shrinking middle class. So we have two sorts of things on the same coin, where if you polled people, you would probably see the middle class, and said, what class are you? You'd probably see the middle class growing. But if you analyzed it with numbers, I guess, sort of just saying, okay, people make this much money, are a part of this class, you'd probably see the middle class shrinking. But pure numbers doesn't really work that well as a definition of class. One sort of fun way I thought of to determine classes is your video games. Oh, who just took something? I think it was the Greeks that took one of my cities. I don't know if Egypt is going to take a city. I hope they don't. I need to stop them from doing that, sort of head them off diplomatically. Anyway, if you can't afford a video game, an Xbox or a PlayStation, I want to forget about the Wii. It gets a bit more complicated when we talk about Wii's, or Switches, I guess now, the Nintendo Switch. But if you can't afford an Xbox or a PlayStation, you're lower class. If you can buy both an Xbox and a PlayStation, you're upper class. And if you have to choose between Xbox and PlayStation, you're middle class. I think that's a pretty good definition. A lot of people who don't understand economics think that having to make choices is, everyone has to make choices, and that's what economics is. It's making choices with what to do with time and money. And making choices is a part of economics. And just because you have to make choices between two things doesn't mean you're poor. And it seems to me that maybe some people think that. But, and I think, and at the end of the day, everyone has to make choices. And if you make, there's sort of a Buddhist philosophy going on here, where if you make more money, you're not going to be relieved from having to make choices. And that's what I think some people are striving for when they strive towards money. Oh, and I lost another city. And I was thinking about vacations. I can once a year go take a nice trip up to the Great Lakes. And if I had more money, I would go to the Gulf of Mexico. And if I had more, I'd go to the Caribbean. Or still more, I'd go to the South Pacific. But someone with more money gets the same amount of joy from their trips to the Gulf that I get from the trips to the Great Lakes, I think. That's my opinion. I don't think there's anything inherently better. It's your expectations versus reality that matters, not the actual reality of the situation. You know, if you look forward to going to the Gulf of Mexico, and then you go to the Gulf of Mexico, you're just as happy at the Gulf of Mexico as you would be if you look forward to going to the Great Lakes, and then you go to the Great Lakes. And if you look forward to going to the Caribbean, but you sort of lose a bunch of money and have to go to the Gulf of Mexico instead, you're just as disappointed as if you go to the Gulf of Mexico, lose a bunch of money, have to go to the Great Lakes instead. And I think that's part of it. Anyway, a more technical definition of class to do with healthcare and education. The upper classes don't have to worry about healthcare and education. The lower classes technically don't have to worry about it either. They only get what is provided to them by the government or somebody else. And that brings us back to the middle class, where you have to struggle for it. You have to struggle to get the education you get, and you have to struggle to get the healthcare you get. It's not when someone has to go to the emergency room, you have to think, oh, how am I going to pay for this? But at the end of the day, you can make the sacrifices, maybe not go to as many movies or something like that, or go to shows. Because if you're middle class, you can go to a few shows, like Broadway shows, or live shows, concerts. But you may not get to go to as many if there was some sort of medical emergency recently. And that's what makes you middle class, is that you can afford these things. But you actually do have to pay for them, in a way that an upper class person really sort of doesn't have to pay for them. And recently a very good book on class and economic inequality was written by Piketty, who wrote Capital in the 21st Century. And the Greeks are really coming for me. I don't know how this will end. I haven't actually finished this game yet. I sort of talk to try to have some suspense, even though I know what's going to happen. But I haven't actually finished this game, so I know where I am. And the situation's a little better than this, but not much. Where I am in the middle of this game. It's basically right like this again. In Capital in the 21st Century, he was looking at the financial crisis of 2008, and he postulated, and he saw that economic inequality hit a peak by his metrics, hit a peak in 2008, and he postulated that there may be a structural limit to economic inequality. I'm not too sure about that. I mean, there are countries with more economic inequality than the U.S., and they didn't collapse. But of course, maybe this was a global economic inequality that he was talking about. I just lost my leader, so I can't build an army. I'll eventually probably get another one. You get a few if you play this game well. And one of the most fun things that I typically use in arguments a lot is that he called immigration the bulwark against economic inequality in America. And it also is a bulwark against economic inequality in the countries that they immigrated with an E from. Immigrate rather than immigrate with an I to. It's sort of, you can sort of think of it as, it's not a perfect analogy, but as evaporation, which when something evaporates, it cools. The hottest particles in the water evaporate, which cool the water, and then the hottest particles in the particles which have evaporated become the coolest particles in the air, which cools the air as well. So both parts of the system have cooled. And when I have water with ice in it, first thing I do is I shake it up. And some people wonder, what are you doing there? Like, oh, I'm cooling the water. And I said, no, shaking it makes the water warmer. And I replied, no, it makes the system warmer, which melts the ice, which cools the water. So that was just a sort of a sidetracked thing, just to prove how smart I am, I guess. That wasn't apropos of anything. But anyway, little bit of discussion about economic inequality. That was fun. This one takes a lot longer than the one we did a while, so we'll be here for a little while. This army's coming. They're still coming for me, and I wonder if I'll be able to push them back. I will see you in a little bit. Bye-bye.